All right, you should see that on your end. All right, again, I'd like to welcome you. Oh my goodness, there's so much to cover today. We'll be with you at least for an hour and 15 minutes, and I'm hoping that we answer questions that you have about COVID-19, about the vaccinations, about options that you have to become vaccinated. And we want to hear from you. We want to know the hesitancies that you have so that our guests, so that me and our board members and our guest immunologist, Dr. Kara Conway from Jacksonville University can answer those concerns. So let me slow down a bit and let me say, hey, I'm LaTonya. I'm the president of the Florida Association for Multicultural Counseling and Development. I have two of my board members here today who are going to be taking care of you by way of the chat, as well as sharing their stories with COVID-19 vaccinations, why they have gotten vaccinated or why they have not. And that is Dr. Amanda DiLorenzo-Garcia, as well as Francis Delarosa, who's with us. And then our guest immunologist is Dr. Kara Conway from Jacksonville University. To get us started, I'd like to say, hey, use your chats, ask questions in the chat. Let us know that you're agreeing or you're not agreeing at this particular time by using the chat. And again, we'll have questions and answers with you, for you at the end of this. I want to get started by talking about the journeys that we're on regarding COVID-19 and this vaccination. So I'd like to have my board members speak at this particular time to tell us if they're vaccinated, led them to get vaccinated, or if they're not vaccinated, what keeps them from getting vaccinated. So I will ask Francis and Amanda, will you ladies share your journey with us, please?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. Currently, I'm a graduate student earning my master's in mental health counseling. And with COVID, I was on both sides at certain points. One point was I was very eager to get the vaccine because I felt like I just want to be prepared and feel safe for me and my family. But then once I started to do a little more research, for me, the way I saw it was really targeted for the communities of people of color. And they just keep on with the advertising, it's free, it was very concerning to me. And so I kind of just slowed down, and now I haven't gotten vaccinated. And I am working face to face in the financial field, and I see the difference, and I hear the chatter, and I hear the concerns. And so I'm so excited to be a part of this panel today, just to get more information and to ask questions, of course, regarding the status of the vaccine and how it really affects our community.
Thanks, Francis, for sharing. Hi, everyone. I'm Amanda DiLorenzo-Garcia. I am privileged to be on the board as secretary for FAMCD. In terms of the vaccine, I put a lot of thought into it too. As Francis was saying, I was really excited at first and then was looking at both sides. I'm lucky that my husband is a physiologist, and he did a lot of the research behind it, and we would talk about what we were reading and what our concerns were and our hesitations. And we both sought consultation with medical doctors about our own personal health while making that decision. And so I am vaccinated. I am so blessed to have received the Moderna vaccine. I got my second dose at the beginning of February. And so I made that decision around my personal health and in consideration to protect my family as well, including my husband and other family and relatives that worried about with COVID-19, and then also as a professional in the community. So in order to eventually go back and serving the communities in similar ways as before, while also considering safety guidelines currently, I want to make sure that I was protected and that I was protecting those I was interacting with, my colleagues, community members, those that are in similar offices. So those were my thoughts behind it. In both programs. So that's what led me to make the decision that I made.
Thank you both for sharing your stories about the COVID vaccination. I've asked a poll question, are you vaccinated? There is one of us who said yes. There are 5 of us who said not yet. And there are 2 of us who have said no. I wish I could see the racial and ethnic background of those of us who are vaccinated and those who are not. And again, this talk is geared towards anyone and everyone who's considering the vaccination, especially those of us who live in the community and communities of color. Let me say, I had to do a lot of psychological work to get this vaccination. My first thought was, oh, heck no. I'm not signing up for anything that's experimental, right? We don't have enough research. We don't have all these things. So I reached out to Dr. Conway, and I knew she was an immunologist. And I said, hey, help me with this. And I said to her, there's so many cultural barriers that I have to overcome. I'm one generation removed from scientific racism. My paternal grandfather was one of the subjects of the Tuskegee experiment. So my family and all of us are like, heck no. But considering I'm a professor, still teaching on campus, I knew I needed to protect myself as well as my students. And then my father, who's been sick, asked us to get vaccinated. That's the only reason that I chose to become vaccinated, is because my father asked me to. Otherwise, I'd still be hesitant. All right, thank you so much. I want to hear from those of you who are joining us. Please use your chat. Francis is moderating that chat. Tell us about your decision to vaccinate or not, and still your hesitancy. And Francis, as things come up in the chat, feel free to let us know. If there is nothing in the chat right now, Francis, I will continue, and I will go ahead and introduce Dr. Kara Conway, who works with me here at Jacksonville University. I was so super glad to just find her and develop relationship with her, and I'm super glad that she's here with us today. She's just been a wealth of information, and I thought to invite her to help clear up some misinformation. So I'm hoping that this gets deep. All right, Dr. Conway, can you clear up some of the misinformation that persists, especially in communities of color? For instance, some of us, we know that COVID-19 is real. We know it's something, right? Because folks are dying, and we don't want to dishonor folks who have lost loved ones and friends, students and peers, and so on and so forth to COVID. But some of us don't believe that COVID is really something to be concerned about. We believe it's propaganda, right? I've heard, among the folks in my community, like, man, if they can desensitize, the government, or whomever they might be, if they can desensitize us and make us get a vaccination, what's coming down the pipe that they might try to make us get, like the mark of the beast, implant chips in our arms, those kinds of things. Help us kind of clear up some of the things that we might believe among communities of color, please. Thank you.
Sure. Of course. Thank you all for inviting me to be here. I'm very excited. I should start maybe with a little intro. So I am an immunologist. I got my PhD in autoimmune diseases, and then I postdoced and did inflammatory diseases. So I studied like immune response. I'm not someone who studies the actual pathogen. So I by no means am a coronavirus expert, but I do feel, relatively fluent in how we are responding to that virus. And so I just want you, disclaimer at the beginning. But yeah, I mean, there is a lot of, misinformation or, communication that's been hard, I think, and, I think part of the problem is that a lot of this has been blurred with, our government and science, instead of just kind of focusing on kind of a scientific angle. And that's what I'm trying to do today. I, of course, I'm not a person of color, so I am sensitive to, these, cultural, differences, and certainly I'm learning a lot about that as well. But, just trying to give you kind of the scientific background, I think is what I'm able to do. So let's see. So some of the things, what did you mention? Just, implanting things. Well, I mean, one of the things that, I'm sure you guys have seen all over the news, but I mean, they're maybe doing it purposefully, I would say, to engage, communities of color, is to highlight that there is a lot more representation in science, in biomedical science now, in terms of, people of color. And I think that is encouraging for a lot of different reasons. But, in the past, there has been some egregious problems with different biomedical trials and stuff like this. So I completely understand that hesitation. But, one of, the founding, people that basically discovered some of these vaccines, and I have some stuff that we can talk about later about the actual vaccines, as a Black person, actually she went to UNC, one of my alma maters. So, there's a lot more representation. So I think that's a nice thing that, you don't feel like this is, something that's being, like pulled over people, and not like a real, scientific feat. Maybe another thing, Dr. Summers, that you brought up that I think is a good thing to point out is, yes, this vaccine came about very quickly, compared to normal vaccine development. So I understand that hesitation, for anyone as well. I will say that this has been a problem in our community for a long time. So before I came here, I was up in Boston working at Mass General, and that was like a constant conversation that all these scientists were having, which was, why does it take so long to get some proof of concept to a drug to the community? If it can help these people, why? I mean, there's just so much red tape. Of course, some of the red tape should be there, of course, for safety. But it's a problem. And so I will say that there were already things put in place for us to get to this point as quickly as we did. I will also say, yes, this strain of SARS-CoV-2 is a new pathogen, but this family of viruses has been studied forever. And so actually one of my fellow students in grad school, he was studying this little class of viruses and nobody cared about them and they couldn't get funding for them. They weren't that exciting. And then all of a sudden, you guys remember the SARS in early 2000s that came out. Then they got a bunch of funding because, this is a big deal, but that ended up not being as severe as this. So there's been people that are studying these viruses and ways to approach these viruses all the time. And so that's why we were so well poised, I think, not we, but the biomedical community to, they knew a lot about how these viruses worked. And so they were able to combat them. And even some of these drugs, and we can talk about this later, but some of these drugs they'd already been testing against viruses, especially even in this coronavirus family. And then in terms of vaccines, I mean, and I have a couple slides to show you guys if you're interested later about the approach. So how the vaccines are actually working. And the approaches that they have used, all these different companies are kind of coming at it at different angles, but we've been doing this for a long time. Some of the ones are new vaccines. So the mRNA vaccines are a newer, this will be the first, or these are the first ones that have ever been approved. But hopefully I'll be able to prove to you guys that it's like such a beautiful thing that is super low risk. And it's just kind of, the perfect, coming together of the people who are researching this virus as well as the vaccine developers that kind of came together that I think made it come so quickly. But I also recognize that a lot of people are hesitant. Do we know the long-term effects? No. But some of what we do know is, and again, I can show you guys later, but these viruses or these vaccines, are not going to be in our body forever. They kind of go in, elicit an immune response, and then they're gone. And so I think that's kind of an encouraging thing. You're not feeling like you're altering something in your own genome. You're just literally eliciting an immune response, and then it's over and you're protected. So yeah, I mean, are there other misinformation things that you want me to hit on? Maybe I think we had briefly discussed the flu versus COVID thing.
Yes. Yeah, that's definitely coming up. What you've said is, thank you so much for sharing what you've shared thus far. Like, hey, we're not changing our own biochemistry, our own genome with this thing, that it comes in, it elicits a response, and then it's gone. So that explains why we'll have to continue to get the vaccination as this thing mutates and change, right? Mm-hmm. Yes. And let me tell you, from my community, folks are saying, look, by the time the government, I'm not even going to remember what I've heard. Like, by the time, if the government has a name for something, they already have an antidote for it, as if like the government controls this thing. So never mind. Let's not answer that, because I'm going to tell you, I could take you through the woods with just the folks I hang out with. And I'm talking about family, right? You guys are going to say, Dr. Summers needs to certifiably be hospitalized. She's paranoid and delusional by the time I finish. But thank you so much for clearing up some of that misinformation. Some folks in the audience may have questions for us. We'll get to those. I want to say, like, the people are saying, like, why should we be concerned about COVID? More folks have died from the flu. We weren't up in arms about the flu, so why be up in arms about COVID?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the first thing is just time, right? So how fast that this particular coronavirus has spread. That's why we're in a global pandemic. And so I think, yes, the flu has killed a lot of people over time. Certainly not as many in this, short amount of time, I guess is the easy way to say that. And so the reason is it's much more contagious. And so it's just, there are all these super spreader events you guys have heard of. They're, the transmission of both of them are pretty similar. They're respiratory viruses that get spread, by respiratory droplets. There are cases of, contact and this kind of thing. But the coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2, is basically, besides being, easier to catch, it also stays contagious longer. So you all have heard that, you can, when you're infected, when you're exposed, you can acquire, or, you get symptoms, at like day 2 or not until day 14. And so that's part of why this is, why they kind of started doing all these lockdowns, is because, we don't know when we're carrying it. And this is kind of a scary thing that way. Whereas flu, when you're exposed, quite early. And so then you're sick, you kind of stay in your house. So this window, I think, is one thing that makes it more severe. And then just really the complications. There are statistics that show us that, yes, flu can be fatal as well as COVID-19, but the proportion is much different. So people who acquire SARS-CoV-2 have a higher chance of having a severe complication, whole organ failure, respiratory failure, and eventually death. And so the numbers behind it, the short amount of time, how contagious it is, I think really is what sets it apart. And I think people also have sort of maybe at least some of my friends that push me on this as well is the flu vaccine, for example. So a lot of people don't get the flu vaccine every year, and we have to get it every year. Why do we have to get it every year? Well, the fact of the matter is the flu, the influenza virus mutates quite frequently, and that's basically why we have to, the companies are guessing what it's going to look like in the coming year. And so sometimes they do a really great job of guessing and develop a great vaccine, and then other times it's not as effective. And then so that's why people are, I think, already on guard with viral vaccines in general. I don't really like this. I still got the flu when I got the flu vaccine. Oh, the flu vaccine's only 30% effective. These are all true things, but there is some efficacy. But I will say on the flip side, these 3 vaccines that have been approved for COVID-19 are extremely effective. So we're not seeing anything that's like 30-something% like we sometimes see with the flu. I always get the flu shot. I will say I'm an immunologist. I have no choice. But I understand why people are, I've never gotten the flu before. I get that. For coronavirus, I really feel like these vaccines are alarming, like amazingly wonderful at what they've done. And so it's just, I don't know, they're just a lot stronger product. And we have had a lot of success, of other viruses in the past, measles, stuff like this, and the MMR vaccines, those are viral that they've developed that have, a huge efficacy as well. So flu is kind of the little outlier because of how much, hopefully an outlier. I know there's some discussion on whether the coronavirus vaccine is going to have to be annual or not, but we just don't know that yet. Yeah, was that helpful?
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you so much. What you're doing is helping us become more fluent. You're giving us the words to be able to say, one, to ourselves so that we become more comfortable being vaccinated, but also to our loved ones that we would like also to be vaccinated. Hey, Francis, will you moderate the chat? I think there are things coming up in the chat for Dr. Conway that we could add to this discussion at this point.
Sure. So we have a couple of concerns. Some of our participants are people of color, and their main concern was how it would affect them in terms of their current health risk if they have like pre-exposed illnesses, and how it might complicate it if they do contract COVID, especially when they are around young children or other co-workers. One thing that I wanted to ask was, how do people who work in the educational field feel with the potential of being required to get the COVID vaccination in order to go back to work, especially when things are still brand new in terms of reactions or the long-term effects?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I can speak on behalf of everyone, but I think that is a valid concern in terms of the educators. I think it's obviously a personal decision, right? What you feel comfortable, and, for me, again, we're in person at JU. And so that's kind of, one of the things. I also have young children. And so that was one of the driving things for me. I just got my first shot yesterday, but requiring to me seems a little much. I think we should all, this is a personal thing, but an ethical thing, I think. But I think that, it's personal choice, in my opinion, should be whether you get it or not. And so I don't know. I think that'll be a hard fight if, maybe in the private sector, people can do that, but I don't know. I think that's a tough thing to mandate. I don't know. That's just my opinion. I don't know others, what you think.
Dr. Conway, can you speak to the reactions that folks might experience from the vaccine and what research tells us about those reactions?
Sure. So by and large, the side effects are very low. I even have my little sheet that I got yesterday. But they're usually pretty low, kind of similar to normal, regular other vaccines that, headaches, fever. Usually, for most of these, up to the 3 that are on the market now, the main thing is having pain in your arm. Although I do have some colleagues that have gotten kind of out for the count for a day, and that you don't get sick, but you feel sick. And to be honest, as an immunologist, I say, hey, it's your immune system doing what it's supposed to do, so it's actually good. But it's very fleeting usually. Of course, all these places where you get the vaccines, they always have you're monitored afterwards for 15 to 30 minutes to make sure that you're not having one of the more severe reactions, which I don't know, that I don't have the numbers. I apologize, but it's very low. So usually they ask you a lot of questions up front about your health and allergies and stuff like that. That's usually people who might have like an allergy response. So they always at these sites have, medical personnel there in the event that something would happen. But yeah, usually it's pretty minor, maybe like a 24-hour thing.
Yes, thank you so much. Those are really good questions. And as a conspiracy theorist myself, born and raised into a family of theorists, I would say, man, I got that first COVID shot and got sick. And I was like, look, the government trying to kill me. They almost got me, but recovered. And my symptoms, the only thing that I had was the sore shot. The other symptoms that I had was actually because of allergies here in Florida. So I did not get sick even after the second shot. So I'm so very grateful for that. There were questions in the chat though. Juliana, Dr. Lido here is saying she's always been concerned about COVID and believed it to be real and an issue, but still extremely hesitant. She's Black and Hispanic, a wife and a mother of 3, and has health concerns that would potentially put her at risk for complications if she did contract COVID. Any response to that, Dr. Conway?
Yeah, I think some people in that group are actually being prioritized in terms of getting the vaccine if you have health concerns of yourself. And again, they go through kind of a questionnaire when you get vaccinated to make sure. But to be honest, there's not very many groups of people, with a particular disease or condition or something like this that are really excluded from who they think this would be good to receive. So pregnant women, they're vaccinating and have shown protection. And especially people that are at higher risk for complications, here we go again, right? They are encouraging to get this because that is a scary thing. As a society, I think we've done an okay job at controlling the virus. Wearing our masks makes just an unbelievable difference. But in the event that you do contract something, of course, if you are higher risk, the complications can be worse. And so I think, you know, that plays into some people's decision on whether to actually do this. And actually, I'll give you a personal story. My sister is pregnant, so she was a little bit wishy-washy. Oh, you know, they don't have that much data on pregnant women. You know, what should I do? And so she really, you know, went back and forth on it. And she ended up, you know, deciding that, kind of doing, I think what you're alluding to, Dr. Lytle, is like the balance, like which one is kind of worse. And so she, you know, thought, you know, her acquiring coronavirus, actually there's evidence that can have worse effect on her growing baby than, you know, get whatever the vaccine might cause, which is supposed to be safe. But again, we all know this hasn't been that long, but.
Thank you. Dawn is also saying she got her COVID vaccine as soon as possible. As a breastfeeding mom, she wanted to provide the antibodies for her daughter who wouldn't be able to get the vaccine for a long period of time. Let's see, there was something else in here. Dr. Conway, you talked about the alarming efficacy for the COVID vaccine. Yeah. We haven't been able to see with the flu vaccine. And Dr. Lytle asked another question. What can you share some insight on how they achieved this alarming efficacy?
I know. As soon as I said that word, I said wrong word.
Okay, we'll play with it.
It should have been wonderful. But yes, no, it's just the design of the vaccine is so wonderful. I mean, if it's helpful, I have a couple slides just to show you guys how they did this. But I think it's just the approach they took. And I mean, all of these companies are, and academic institutions are focusing on one place on the virus called the spike protein. And it's basically one of these proteins on the outside of the virus. And that thing is basically how it gets into our cells. And something that I don't know if a lot of people are aware of, and we used to get in like little debates with my students, but you know, whether a virus is alive or not. But the argument comes in that, you know, a virus, obviously, you know, we can get infected with a virus. It can't survive if it can't get into our cells. And so it literally, you know, viruses get into our cells and then they hijack the machinery that we have for our cells to work normally. And so if the virus can't get into a cell, it's going to die off. And that's not what a pathogen wants to do, right? A pathogen wants to make more of itself. It can't make more of itself if it doesn't get into our cells. And so that little spike protein, this little thing on the outside of the virus, is what attaches to our cells in order to get it into our cells. And so most of these companies are targeting that exact outermost protein in these vaccines to elicit the immune response and it's basically just something that creates a really robust immune response, because it's kind of the worst part of the virus. That's the thing that our immune system is going to recognize the first.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for answering that question.
Yeah.
Dr. Conway, what about your slides? I'm going to have you, if you don't mind, sharing those slides.
Yeah. I don't have very many, but I'll just show them to you. I just thought it'd be easier to show you guys something instead of just chat about it.
Okay. Folks in the chat are saying thank you. This is so helpful in understanding how the pathogen works.
I guess I'll just show you my desktop. Why not? Oh no, am I not set up to share my screen? Sorry, guys.
No, that's okay.
Okay, here, maybe this will work.
Yeah, we'll give you time to set that up. And while she's setting that up, those of you who are in the audience with us, tell us how you're feeling at this particular time. Is this helpful? Or are you still like, this is just giving me what I need to make sure I don't get vaccinated? Check in with us through your chat.
I don't know why it's not letting me share. I'm so sorry.
It's all right. What is it, a PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know you know how to do this. We've been Zooming for about a year and some change now.
Yeah. I think it's because I have a new computer and it's not letting me do that. Do you mind if I just send it your way real fast?
Absolutely. Yep. If you email it to me, I'll be able to get it.
Okay.
All right. And I don't see folks in the chat telling us that this is helpful or not, or if the jury's still out on that and you need to wait a little bit. We are fine with that. Let's see.
Tanya said, as an individual with underlying medical challenges, this is helpful. Deborah first said, I was sleepy for 2 weeks. Now I am up for a week, but my second shot is Thursday. So I am wondering what to expect for these following 2 weeks. And then she said, I will take my second shot most definitely.
Yes, good. Yeah, after I had that reaction to the first, and although I think 3 to 5 days was enough to say, LaTonya, this was not related to your COVID shot. After then, I heard concerns about people getting that second shot, but I actually had no response to the second shot at all, except the sore shoulder, but nothing else. So I'm so grateful for that, and I'm hoping that that's going to be your story, testimony, however you call it as well. Dr. Conway, I don't see your slide. Did you email it to me?
I did.
You did. You emailed it to me? Okay, I see it now. Thank you.
Yeah, good.
Realizing that we're sharing pieces of our story, I forgot to mention I am someone with a medical allergy, and I felt more comfortable when I consulted a doctor, and then before getting the shot, they ask a lot of questions. So I did stay for a little bit longer, about 20 minutes after the shot, and realized I felt fine and I could leave. But that was a concern of mine up front. And so if that helps anyone to know, like, just to be able to put a face to a name of someone who's had that experience, that was a concern, and I'm thankful that I walked away and all was well. My largest complaint after was that my arm hurt so bad, but other than that, that was a small price to pay for a vaccine to protect my immune system.
Awesome. Okay, so here is the virus. You guys have all seen this on the news, right? It's a CDC picture. But you see the little red triangles, those are the spike proteins. So they're basically on the outside of a virus, and that's what attaches to our cells in order to get in. And so I will say that there are also some companies that are trying to, maybe I should take a step back, but we're all talking about the vaccines because that's what everyone's talking about. And that's to prevent infection in the first place, which is where we want to get. That's how we're going to really eventually end this pandemic. But we also have classes of drugs that are called antivirals that if you do get infected, you can treat. Of course, there's not one that's like specifically tailored yet for SARS-CoV-2, but we have some that are already on the market that are able to target that spike protein, which basically coats it, it covers it up so that it then can't attach to our cells and get in. So I just kind of wanted to show you the structure of the particle. I'm not sure if I can move forward. Okay, good. Okay, let's see. Am I doing this or are you doing this, LaTonya? There's a couple of little animated, if you don't mind just like clicking.
Yes, tell me how far
like,
forward we go.
Maybe two, just 1, 2, I think. Yeah, good. And then maybe another one.
Oh.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so I thought this may be helpful for people who are on the fence about how these different vaccines work. And so I just put together 2 slides to talk about the 3 options. And so there's the 3 main approaches here are 1, 2, and 3. So the first one is protein-based, and that's kind of a classical vaccine that we've been doing for 40 years, 50 years, where you basically isolate a specific protein on the virus. Again, it's our favorite protein, the spike protein, and then inject that little protein into the body and hope that the body recognizes that it's foreign, and then it elicits an immune response. So here you see this little blue Y, those are the cartoon for antibodies. And antibodies, I'm sure you all have heard about for testing, but they're basically what's going to protect us largely. It basically is a readout of that our immune system was activated. And so the thing here, so this one is not on the books yet, so there's no FDA approved protein-based vaccine yet. There are some in development. Some hesitation that people don't like is you have to provide an adjuvant. So these are things that help boost your immune response. And they're, again, due to misinformation, a lot of people shy away from that. And the misinformation all came, you guys are probably aware of the autism thing. So the link between vaccines and autism, which ended up not being true at all. But they were trying to link it back to the adjuvant, so the extra little goodies in the vaccine that boosted the immune response. And so in order to get a good response with protein vaccines, you have to kind of give it a little boost. And so I think there'll be some hesitation from people who still maybe don't understand exactly what an adjuvant is. But the 2 that are on the market are shown down here. So maybe we can start with number 3, since those are the first 2 that came out. So you've heard of the Moderna vaccine and the Pfizer vaccine, and both of those are based in mRNA, that's known as messenger RNA. And so basically, you all know DNA is in our cells. DNA, and DNA basically in order to make a protein to do something, has to go through an intermediate step. And that intermediate step is called the messenger RNA. I always tell my students it delivers the message from the DNA you inherited, delivers the message to tell your body how to make a protein. And so other organisms have that as well. So this virus here can make that little message, this messenger RNA. And the cool thing about these vaccines, and I was mentioning that it's kind of a new idea, they put this little message of how to make, again, our favorite protein on the surface, the spike. They put the little message inside a little ball. I mean, this is oversimplified, but a little ball of lipids. And these are, you know, just little molecules that are actually what our cell membranes are made out of. So all our cells are made out of these little molecules, these lipids. And so they're putting in something that our body already has. And so basically, and then they just package this little message on how to make the protein inside. And so these little lipid balls go into and basically fuse with your cell and drop off the message. And then our body says, oh, here's a message, we need to make a protein. And they then make, our own body makes that viral protein. There's no virus, there's just one little protein that then our body says, hey, this doesn't look like us. They elicit an immune response. And the beauty of this approach is, one, that it can fuse nicely with our membranes, and then it's kind of gone. The vehicle that got the thing there is gone. And then the messenger RNA is going to pass off the message, and then these molecules, they get chopped up super quickly. And so then they're also gone. So I think some people have hesitation thinking, I'm putting something weird, it's altering my genome. This is very temporary. It comes in, passes along the message, gets degraded, no longer in your body. So to me, I think that's kind of a comforting thing. And so that's the approach that these first two, Moderna and Pfizer, have done. And then the third one that's just kind of on the books in the last, week or so is the Johnson & Johnson. You might hear it shorthanded as J&J. And this is a more recent, no, I would say more classical, sorry. This mRNA is, like I told you guys, the first one that has ever been made, an mRNA vaccine. So the one in the middle, here, basically they're taking it's known as an adenovirus. It's just the common cold, and putting in part of the coronavirus inside. And then, as I mentioned to you guys, viruses have to get in to live. And so the virus gets into our cells, drops off this information, and then elicits an immune response. So, you know, the end approach, you know, the end goal is the same. Just how we get there is a little different. So some people get a little bit like, oh, it's not a live virus, this adenovirus one. It's not a virus that's going to get in and, you know, give you a cold and replicate and make more of itself. It's killed before it's put into you. But some people, I think, get a little weirded out by, you know, putting a virus in you. And then the last little thing I just wanted to point out, if you don't mind going to the last slide, is just kind of a little comparison of them. Thank you. So here, oh, sorry, my numbering is weird. So the first one, Moderna was the first one that came out, and Pfizer, remember I just told you they're both mRNA, and they both require 2 shots. So because of this approach, you have to have kind of a booster shot. And so we've all heard about the 2-shot versus 1-shot thing. This is a little more, you know, frustrating, or, you know, takes more time. You have to go twice. You have to allow for a certain amount of time. So they're a little bit different. I think Pfizer's 3 weeks and Moderna maybe 4. To allow, like, for your first round of an immune response to occur, then you go and you hit it again, and then you have a super robust response, and then you're very protected. I have the efficacies down here along the bottom, 95% for both of those. Whereas the newer one, Johnson & Johnson, is the viral vector. The one advantage is it's 1 shot, you go and you're done, and it has a 66% efficacy. And, you know, some people look at those 2 numbers and they're like, obviously I don't want one that's less effective. But to be honest, a lot of vaccines are more towards the 70% effectiveness. That's what I was saying, that these guys are just doing such an amazing job. And I think it's just because of this new vaccine development approach. I will say the J&J one, so an advantage is it's 1 shot. Another advantage is because it came out a little later, they have more time to test it against some of these new variants. Have you guys heard about these? Like, not the original one, it's mutated a little bit. And so they know that this one, J&J, is protective against, I think, most of the variants that they've tested. That's not to say that the Moderna and Pfizer are not. They just haven't tested that because those variants weren't around when they were originally developing. I'm sure they're madly testing them right now as well. So yeah, that's kind of just a little bit of a rundown with the approaches. Hopefully that was helpful. Ask me any questions if you want. I know that's a little deep scientifically, but.
No, that was amazing. Thank you so much. for sharing and taking us to science class with the diagrams and breaking it down. It makes so much sense. So I'm hoping that people are feeling really good about the vaccines as well. I would like to say, and you can tell us, because I'm a Black woman, probably more interested in Black woman things. I'm like, I know that Moderna was created by a Black woman. I know nothing else about Johnson & Johnson or the other ones. But it's Women's History Month, so yay for that Moderna. Hey, Can people request which vaccination they want to get?
That's a great question. So it depends. So it depends on where you go. Certainly, if you go, you make an appointment and you go and you've decided that's not the one you want. I mean, freedom, right? You leave. Some are open with what they have. Other sites will tell you, we don't know what we'll have, so come and see. I think the rationale at the beginning was definitely get whatever one you can, but I will tell you that things are starting to open up more, and these states are starting to allow more people to get this vaccine, and I feel it every day. I mean, especially even me, I was able to get mine yesterday because of the federal, we had a federal site actually set up in Jacksonville that allowed educators of all ages to get vaccinated. And I will tell you they had two. They had, I think, the Pfizer and the Johnson & Johnson, and you got to choose. So in that case, you got to choose, but I don't know if that's true everywhere. So, I think if you do your research and decide which one you want, then I truly think you'll be able to find it, given in the next little bit. I will also say, I've had lots of colleagues around here and then throughout the country that have luck, even if you're not, in one of these prioritized lists, wherever you live, they're starting to open up kind of wait lists for people kind of at the end of the day. So, if you get on a wait list, a Walmart pharmacy or a CVS, and they have thawed, meaning, like they have to keep them cold, and they've thawed, X number out because they thought they had these appointments and then people didn't show. Then they will call people on their wait list. Even, they'll prioritize people who are, say, immunocompromised or elderly or educators now. But if there's no one there, they'll call you. And so I have, people in my life that have gotten vaccinated because, they didn't want these things to go to waste.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think you've answered all of my conspiracy theory questions, especially dispelling myths associated with the vaccination. How can folks get vaccinated? I want to make sure that everybody in the audience knows how they can get vaccinated if they're wanting to. Things are opening up where you don't have to just be 65 or health compromised or a healthcare worker, that the doors are opening. So where should folks go to get vaccinated?
Yeah, I mean, so as I was alluding to before, any of these pharmacies, so all these national pharmacies like Walmart, CVS, Walgreens, they all have vaccines. There are sites that are being set up in cities. So a lot of, one place to start, I would say, is, you can search either the CDC can, you can search by state kind of thing, or your state health departments will basically have, probably the first thing on everyone's page is, COVID information, and you click on it and you can, search your area to see different, public sites that are there. Now, as I mentioned, the one in Jacksonville that just opened was federal. So FEMA is now starting to open and distribute using armed services to give those out across the country as well. And those are kind of big. They're getting like big allotments of them there. So, I think probably the State Department of each is where I would start to see what is open for you. But any of these pharmacies, they have them.
Yes. I'm also told that I saw in the news this morning that we might be swimming in COVID vaccinations. Like there might be these extras because of something. So definitely, check with sites, your local newspapers, your pharmacies, and those kinds of things.
The big one that I went to yesterday here in Jacksonville, they have a capacity to give, I think, over 2,000 a day, and they're not getting anywhere close to that. It's disappointing. I mean, I was like I was almost emotional going in there to get my vaccine yesterday. I was so excited. And it was empty. They had it set up, for lines to go back and forth, and there was no one there. So I think we're getting poised to have like large scale distribution, and I just hope that people, take the time to learn and see whether it's a good choice for them, because, I think the more people that get vaccinated, the faster this pandemic will dissipate.
Yeah, thank you so much. I now want to have Dr. Amanda DiLorenzo-Garcia to start taking questions from the floor. So you can either use your chat or you can unmute yourselves and engage with us and ask questions.
Absolutely. I just wanted to share, there is a question in the chat already. Deborah shared about, she said, now a doctor did tell me if my body reacted, that meant the vaccine was working. After he told me that, I was disappointed that I was only sleeping. I remember telling my bestie that I would feel better if I got a slight tingling headache. And there was some back and forth on that. A curiosity came up about if the vaccine just doesn't work for some folks, or what those reactions really mean. And I was wondering if you could speak more to that, Dr. Conway.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of made the joke earlier, if you're feeling super sick, then that's good. Your immune system's working, going in overdrive. But that's not also, I mean, you can have no symptoms and have just as a robust response. It's just a personal, who knows, your basic genetics that respond in a certain way. So, if you have that fear after you get vaccinated, you can always go and, get a test and see how your antibody titers or, how your levels of antibodies, how they're looking, to see if you developed a robust response. Again, like the numbers of people that they, tested in all these trials before they rolled it out to the general public were very significant. So I really do think that the efficacy is a legitimate number. But yeah, I mean, I understand you also are kind of curious, is it really working? But it should.
And Dr. Conway, I put in the chat that sleeping actually is a reaction. They talked about fatigue, that whole wipeout, like you're exhausted. And
that's one of the big ones actually, is fatigue. That's a good
so sleeping is a reaction, knowing, just confirming that the vaccination is working.
Yeah, you're right.
There's another question in the chat. Oh, Francis, do you want to take it?
Yeah, so Dawn asks, do you have any information about when children will be able to be vaccinated?
I don't. I've been thinking the same. So I know that there are some trials that are now starting in children. I don't know if they're going on here. The last one I heard of was in Europe. But that is the big question, of course, with all the students, the young children going to school and getting them back into a normal environment there. They're focusing more on the educator side of things and not the kids, but that's just because, it's hard, as you all can assume or presume, to enroll kids in trials ethically. And so I think that's the challenge that they're coming up against right now. But yeah, that's, I think, a to be continued. I honestly don't know enough about that, I guess.
Are there any other questions? I don't see anything in the chat, but I might be missing something. If you'd like, you're welcome to unmute yourself to ask a question or post in the chat. As we're waiting, I just wanted to say this has been such a great conversation so far with the questions and some of the feedback that's been posted. So thank you all.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll unmute and ask the question. So someone just mentioned that we will, and first of all, hello and thanks for this webinar. Someone had just mentioned about the overabundance, the supply, and I heard that eventually we may want to take all three. What do you think about that?
Oh. I haven't heard much about that, especially with a 95% efficacy. That's interesting. I mean, I guess it wouldn't hurt, huh? I guess it wouldn't hurt, but I don't know if it would help. I mean, eventually they're probably doing studies right now to look at, the different antibody responses elicited by each of them. And, if they come in and say, okay, this J&J one is targeting something and this one is targeting something different, maybe they work together, but then we get into the problem that they're companies and they don't want to work together. And they're competing with one another.
Yes.
Absolutely. That's what I heard, Carol, what you just said.
Yeah. One of the things I'm sure a lot of people I'm sure they're already on it, but if this does turn into something that we need annually or that they suggest annually, I wonder if they're going to start making something that's like flu and coronavirus in one shot. So you don't have to go for two different things. So I'm sure people are already working on that as well.
Yeah.
Dr. Conway,
Oh, go
We
ahead.
have another question. How do you enroll in the CDC vaccine check-in?
Sorry?
How do you enroll in the CDC vaccine check-in?
Oh, yeah, that is all online. I actually have a few friends that I went to grad school with that are involved in that at the CDC right now. I don't know the exact link, but I think you should be able to click from it super easily from their website. Oops, I can't pull that up right now. Yeah, there you go. Trying to think of anything else that I wanted to share with you guys. Yeah, I mean, I think also, obviously I'm speaking from a scientific standpoint, so I believe in and an immunologist standpoint, so I'm a big vaccine advocate, but there is a lot that we don't know. I mean, even susceptibility of coronavirus, why is it, some people are asymptomatic and some people are in the hospital on ventilators. Someone that I used to work with in Boston is actually kind of taking it from a genetic approach, not from the virus, but from us. And so what our genes, our genes make us more susceptible or not. And so there's a lot of interest in approaching it from a genetic angle. But there are all these different reports, your blood type can make a difference, and, obviously, age and underlying health conditions. So there is, of course, a lot that we don't know. And so I understand that that's playing into people's hesitancy as well, completely. But I just really think that the design of the vaccine is very low risk with very high reward.
Thank you, Dr. Conway. I'm not seeing anything else in the chat. I thought of a question that might help folks that are making decisions around their family. I'm curious of what is the youngest age that is that they know that the vaccine is safe for currently?
I think it's around 16. I think it's 16 for all three, at least for 2 of them.
Perfect. I just figured that would help some people out there who have kids at home and young people in their life. Absolutely.
Yeah, we also have the conversation. So now, I'm 1 shot in, but, then the rest of my family's not vaccinated. So, it's kind of like, okay, is this going to work if, we're not all doing this in the same house?
Yeah, that brings me to a point too, where I was not going to get vaccinated because I'd heard of herd immunity. So all my colleagues who are non-Black had already gotten vaccinated. And I thought, well, shoot, I'm gonna be protected by herd immunity because y'all have gotten vaccinated. Will you speak about herd immunity?
Yeah, sure. So herd immunity, I mean, this is something that, we've talked about in immunity, since that's basically how we discovered immunity, which is, it's basically the idea that if most other people are vaccinated, then you yourself won't get sick. You won't acquire it. The challenge, and of course, we hear it on the news, like we're wanting to get to herd immunity, and there's something to be said. There are some people who are immunocompromised that can't take this vaccine, and so that's why we need. Sorry, now I'm getting biased. That's why there's a push, let's say, to have as many people vaccinated as they can. But the thing that can happen is, some people also think, this is a good one to bring up with coronavirus. I've been exposed before, so I'm immune, which is not the case here. That is the case for a lot of things. That is not the case for this SARS-CoV-2. You can get it again. The long-term antibody response, usually you develop an antibody response that stays with you for your whole life. Those are my cells that I studied, B cells. These, for whatever reason, this virus is not inducing long-term antibody responses. Sorry about that. So you can get it again. And so, that's one of the reasons I think that vaccination is important, which is, to protect the other people around you that aren't, children right now, for example. Or I always give the example when I'm teaching in my class, like little babies that are too young to get their vaccinations, stuff like that. And so, sometimes, and I think that's something that we should keep in our mind is, yes, of course, it's important for ourselves and we need to make a personal decision, but it's also a public health decision, and family, looking at your family members around and stuff like that.
Perfect. I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat. If anyone would like, you're welcome to unmute or post a question in the chat. Dr. Conway, are there any resources that you would recommend folks look at in terms of making a decision around getting vaccinated?
I mean, I always default to the CDC. I think they're the most straightforward They do it in a nice way for the layperson. You know, there's lots of science to dig into, but it also does a nice comparison of each of these things. Yeah, so that's my default. Of course, there's, you know, lots of literature that you can read from the National Institute of Health as well.
Perfect. There's a great question in the chat. It's, what do you think about vaccinated people hanging out together?
Yeah, that's a good one. Didn't they? I think they just came out on the news saying that it's okay, right? I think it's okay. But I think some of what we've started to do in our life is going to stick with us for a long time, right? Like not, kind of spacing each other out, making sure we're really good with hand washing. I mean, for a long time, I'm going to be mask wearing. But yeah, I mean, in theory, once you're vaccinated, we should be okay to go. But the challenge is going to be getting to that point where so many people are vaccinated. So I think mask wearing will be around for quite a bit longer, at least.
Perfect. Thank you all for your questions. I just want to say thank you for everyone who's attending. Dr. Summers, do you want to pose any other questions or conclude our time together?
No, thank you. If there are no more questions or concerns, and if all of our hearts and minds are clear, and we feel like our questions have been answered and we've become more literate, we have the fluency to be able to speak to our loved ones about becoming vaccinated as well as ourselves, I feel like our job here is done. Just thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It's
Yes, thank you, Dr. Conway.
And I appreciate
Dr. Conway, what if folks want to get in touch with you? Will you provide do you feel comfortable providing your email in the chat?
Here, yeah, I'm happy to chat.
Dr. Lytle.
Talking about this stuff, and I like learning more about it. I mean, even have my conversations with you, Dr. Summers. I mean, it was, kind of, you asked me like a small little question, and I wrote you this diatribe of my opinion. I apparently felt very passionate about. But I'm interested to learn more, and stuff that I don't necessarily know from my side. So I appreciate you guys inviting me here.
Oh, you're so very welcome. Thank you for being here. All right, we will give back the rest of your afternoon to you. Thank you again for being here. Take care, be safe, and stay healthy.
Thanks.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.